Casey Lucius.
Oh, and I'm Ron Gailey. Hey, we're going to start this session, because it is about surveys, we're going to start with a little bit of a poll. And what we'll do is we're going to go technology, and then we noticed the internet was pretty doggone slow. So we scrapped the technology, and we're going to go old-fashioned raise of hands. And so it should be more effective, and it should be equally as useful. In the past 5 years, have you done, and then let's do a raise of hands, have you done a citizen survey? Quite a few. An employee survey? Quite a few. Both. I guess there's a lot of both. No, medium. Neither. A few neithers. Well, there you go. So they're very popular. We understand that a lot of cities do them, but there's a lot of issues with them as well. And we're going to be talking about some of the don'ts, a number of the do's, and give you a good hint on, from my end, how to make sure you have citizen surveys that work well for you. And then Casey, and we're going to talk about our stories as well. Here's another question. How did you do your most recent survey? 1, raise of hands, hired a local or a regional expert. Anybody? Some? Oh, I should have added another one here, but hired a national municipal expert. These are the guys that this is what they do, right? And then subscribe to a tool where you like, so do it yourself. You can do it all yourself and get the analysis yourself. Subscribe to a tool. Quite a few subscribe to a tool. And then do it yourself using like Google Forms or some other way of getting it done. There's some of those too. A bit of a challenge on those two sometimes. And then did anybody hire a university here? Anybody do that? Yeah, that happens quite a bit too. Hire a university. So we'll talk about some of those things as we go forward. The merits, the pluses, and the minuses of each of those. But Casey had a bit of an introduction. We'll let her do more.
Well, yeah, thank you to Jack for the kind introduction. I wanted to provide a little bit of context for where I'm coming from when we're talking about surveys, collecting information, analyzing information. As Jack told you, I spent 7 years on active duty as a naval intelligence officer. And as a naval intelligence officer, we're trained to collect and analyze information and then use that analysis to make recommendations to decision makers, and then take their decisions and turn them into action plans. So luckily, that training has also worked really well in local government. The other thing that I learned in the military is the importance of doing after-action reviews. So in the military, after any major exercise or any major incident, we would get input from basically every rank, from the highest to the lowest rank, anyone who was involved in that exercise or that incident, ask them for their input. What went right? What went wrong? Where can we improve? And we would put all of that information together into an after-action report and then turn that into an improvement plan so the next time we could get better. Again, applying those things to local government has, I think, served me well, and the city of Marco Island. I also spent some time, like Ron did, in Asia, working for the Department of State as a civilian, and then also working for the Department of Defense as a civilian. I got involved in local government in 2012 when I ran for city council in a small town in California called Pacific Grove. And that was very interesting to me. I'll just tell you briefly how I got involved in that. Someone came to my door and said, "Will you sign this petition because we want to get a speed bump because cars are speeding up and down the road?" I was like, okay, I signed it. Same guy comes back like a week later and he says, we have to present this petition to the committee, the advisory committee, and I can't go. Will you take the petition and present it? So I said, okay. So I take the petition and I present it to this citizens advisory committee. And then when I'm at that committee meeting, one of the committee members said, "We have a vacancy on the committee. Would you like to apply to be on the committee?" And I'm like, okay. So then I'm on the advisory committee for a couple of years. And then, now we have elections for city council. Would you like to run for city council? I'm like, okay. don't do that. Don't sign the petition. It started with a speed bump. I always tell people, like, my entree into local government started with a speed bump, and it really did. But being on city council was very informative to me. As you all know, one of the main responsibilities of the city council is to pass a budget. But what I found was we didn't have any criteria for making those decisions, for making those budgetary decisions. And as somebody who had been trained, again, in gathering information and analyzing information, I was looking for the data. Where's the data? How are we making these budgetary decisions? So I just give you that as a little bit of context as we move into this presentation. As Jack mentioned, 3 years ago, I arrived in Marco Island and started working for the city of Marco Island. And of course, that was right at the start of COVID. And just like every city or county here, in the last 3 years, we've all been through COVID. We've been through civil rights protests. We've been through contentious national elections that has added a lot of tension and hostility to our communities. And then most recently, some of us have been through Hurricane Ian. And so those are all major incidents where we have to pause and evaluate our performance. And that's another way where surveys and after action reviews are very helpful and can inform decision making for municipalities. An interesting thing about Marco Island is Marco Island's been a city for 25 years, but they had never done a citizen engagement survey. So in 2021, we set out to do a citizen engagement survey, and I went through the procurement process. I got quotes from several companies, got demos from several companies, got sample surveys, got sample reports, and then took that before the city council and presented those options with my recommendation. And I won't tell you yet what they said, but after Ron goes through a couple of his slides, we'll come back to this and I'll share the feedback with you that I got from the city council.
Thank you. So it was mentioned that I worked in banking, and I did. I worked for two major banks, and I was the insights director for those two banks. And so I would help senior executives with their decisions, like how do we market, and will this ad succeed, or which city should we move to, and we did a lot of things, which how do we blend the brokerage with the banking industry, the bank much better. There were just a lot of questions and topics that I helped these senior executives do. And it was an excellent career until my bank failed in 2008 with the mortgage loan crisis, and Chase bought them. And I had had enough with banking. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I put out my shingle and I landed a job at Coca-Cola. This ad that you see here is a Coca-Cola ad from Thailand. Actually, I lived in Thailand for 6.5 years and in Hong Kong for a year and a half. But my job was to help Coca-Cola executives make decisions in each of the countries of Asia. And so I was responsible for all of Asia, and I'd travel, and we would build strategies and so forth. And I'll give one story. When I was with Coca-Cola, I had not been there long, and the president of Asia came to me and asked if we could do a general population survey and a study to find out how we could have more impact with those with very, very low incomes. How could we do that, and what would be possible? And so I hired a reputable company, and they came in, and we discussed what we needed to accomplish. They did the study, and then it came back, and it was pretty clear to me after a little while that what they had given me was pretty cookie cutter, and the analysis was pretty cookie cutter too. And I was dealing with a president who wanted to make some decisions, and there just wasn't, like, the data was there. There was so much data, but the information was pretty hard to make decisions with. And so I worked at it and worked at it and worked at it till we could get something that was very useful. And it turned out to be a success. But the number of hours I put into it was huge. And I learned a lot through that process and many other processes about what executives need and how they need to make decisions, and they don't have patience for something really long or confusing, and they don't want to be told what to do. They want to be informed intuitively what to do, where they can see for themselves. And I learned a lot. And so from that point on at Coca-Cola, like everything, we did it ourselves. We oversaw it. We created solutions that the executives loved. Well, after a while, I was ready to do something else, and I started my own company. And my company, initially, we grew really well with T-Mobile, Coca-Cola, KFC. Like, we were really successful, and the executives of these companies loved what we were doing. And I loved it too. I mean, I had my own company and I was really, really happy. And you're probably saying, well, that's great, Ron, but what does this have to do with cities? And it has nothing to do with cities yet, but let me tell you a story. So I was contacted by a city manager in Texas, and this was only 3 years ago, so it's not been long. And the city manager asked me if I would help him with his survey. He had been doing city surveys for many years. Every year they would do a survey. And he said, it's long, it's bloated, we're not getting the results out of it, and I'm spending too much time on it. Can you help me? And so I said, well, I really don't know how to help a city. Like, that's not in my wheelhouse. And he said, well, I know cities. I need somebody who knows research. And so I said, okay, under those conditions, we'll do it. And so I executed the survey with him. And let me tell you a little bit about his survey. Like, it was a good, typical survey. It had, how much do you agree with the following things? And people could agree or disagree, a long list. And how satisfied are you with the following attributes of the city? And it was just a typical, oh, I'm this satisfied or that satisfied. And how would you rate the service provided by? And you can see there's like 18 of these, but he sometimes had many more than 18. You know, they were longer and shorter sometimes, but he probably had, it looks like 3 questions, but it's actually 3 times 18. Like, it's a lot of questions that they were doing, and his survey just ballooned with these kinds of questions. And so I looked at how to simplify the survey. His was probably 20 minutes. I said it could only be 10, at most 10. And how could I give him 20 minutes worth of data in a 10-minute survey? But I thought about it, I pondered on it, and came back to him with a solution. And it turned out kind of like, instead of him looking at all of the data saying, man, I have to do everything, which is what sometimes you seem to get from a citizen survey, everything feels important. Everything seems like it has to be done. Adopting kind of the processes that I had learned along the way, we made something like really good for him. And it looked kind of like this, where on the left, you find out what's most important to you. And on the right, we get the rating. And you can say, well, city cleanup events are really important. And frankly, we're not doing very well. On the other hand, down at the bottom, the city depot building is important to only 2% of the people. And they don't like it. But hey, it's only 2%. So maybe, you know, if we have to prioritize from top to bottom, and we made it super easy for him to prioritize and see where he was going. So it worked out really well. And he even joined us. He said, sure. And we wrote a PM magazine article. And anyway, it was a very successful thing. And I thought to myself, you know, I could help KFC sell more chicken, or I could help a city with their decisions. And you know what? I loved it. Like, I thought, this is what I want to do. And I exited the work for businesses, and I still do a couple of friends, but that's about it. And then I thought, I'm going to focus on cities and towns. And it's been a wonderful personal change for me. Not as much money, but personally fulfilling.
Okay, so this is an actual picture of me at the actual city council meeting where I'm presenting these survey options to the city council. And I don't know if you can tell, but I have probably an annoyed look on my face. So I presented these options to the city council, made a recommendation, and basically they shot me down. What they said was the survey options I was presenting were outdated, too traditional, the surveys themselves were too long, or the report was too cumbersome, the price point was a concern. And for my city council, they wanted to be able to customize the questions. They wanted to make sure that only full-time residents could take the survey, not visitors, not seasonal residents. And they wanted to be able to verify that residents could only take the survey once. So they had some very specific requirements. And although this was never said in that room, I think there was also a sentiment that maybe we didn't really want to do a survey. Maybe we talk about community engagement, but once you do it, and once you ask people for their feedback, you have to receive their feedback, and you have to be willing to take action on their feedback. And I think a little bit of reality sunk in of, do we really want to do this, or are we being resistant? So I went back to my office that week and basically started from square one. And I actually picked up this version of PM Magazine, and this is from 2021, and it had an article on community surveys. And it was the story of the city manager in Texas, who I didn't know, nothing in the article talked about Ron or OnPointe Insights. But I did call that city manager in Texas and said, it sounds like you had a really great community engagement survey. Tell me about your experience and tell me who you used. And then he pointed me to Ron and OnPointe Insights. And I will tell you that I spent a lot of time thinking about this question of, should we even do a survey? Why do I even want to keep pursuing this? Why do I want to go back to the city council again and be rejected again? But I persisted because I think it is important we say that we want community feedback. We say we want community engagement. And I think it's important to actually show that and demonstrate that. And I think it's important to create an environment where your citizens know that what they think and what they feel and what they have to say matters. And that you're not just listening to the few people who show up at a city council meeting, but you want to hear from all of them. And the only way you can really hear from all of them is in a systematic, organized way through a survey that everyone can access. Doesn't mean everyone's going to take it, but at least give them the opportunity. And I think what that does is it lets people know that what they think does matter. They don't have to come to a city council meeting. They don't have to email the city manager or the council and complain about something to be heard. They can be heard through this mechanism. So once I got pointed in the right direction with OnPointe surveys, OnPointe Insights, I talked to Ron, and the survey that he offered and the method that he used did check all those boxes that the city council was asking for. So he's going to walk through some of these things that as you go through your own procurement process and as you watch the demos and think about what system you might want to use, he'll let you know, here are some things you should be looking for, here are some things you want to avoid. And then we'll come back and I'll share with you the results that we got in Marco Island, both for a citizen survey and an employee survey, and then how we acted on those results. Because I think at the end of the day, that's where you really want to get to, is what are you going to do now with all of this information?
Excellent. By the way, I presented to their city council, and they were a tough group. We squeaked by, actually, to do that study with them. It was a tough group. Okay, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So when you're looking or when you're planning to do a research study, there are plenty of things that are good and some things that are not so bad and some things that are downright ugly. And I want to speak about some of each of those. But before we do that, we're going to do a quick little poll. And so then, what bothers you most when taking a survey? Just think about yourself. You're taking a survey and look down the list here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a number and then raise your hand, right? But look down the list here of the things when you take a survey that feel, you're not so big on that, right? And we're going to put you in the shoes of a citizen, right? Okay, how many of you, it bothers you when you feel that the questions are leading? Yeah, that happens a lot. Questions that seem irrelevant. Do you ever get those? Well, sometimes, not very often. Ranking questions. Rank these top things from 1 to 10 or whatever. I hate those as well. Too many comment questions, like comment. Yeah. Long batteries of questions. Agree to disagree. Yeah, you get those. And also just in general, long surveys. I think this is going to be a common thing. I start checking my watch at about 5 or 6 minutes, but if they kind of give me a cookie, along the way, I know I'm almost to the end, I'll keep going, but that's very typical. And so good on you. Thank you on that. Okay. And what I'm going to show you are actual survey output from actual cities that some of them I'm working with now, and some of them were speaking with them. Here's one where they went to the local university, and some universities might be really good, but this city got like what you see here times 8. They got this times 8, and it was just like you keep on going through it and you see the data. And the good thing is it was really cheap, and there was lots of information, and it had some some very good questions. But the bad thing is it's just like too dense. They would look at this data and try to figure out what it was. There's minimal analysis. It's impossible to prioritize. How do you prioritize this? I guess you look at the red, things or whatever, and you try to figure out how to prioritize. And in the end, it's so much work that in this city, they didn't really even use it. She said they did it, but they didn't really use it, which is sad. Here's another one, an industry-leading survey tool. They're out there, and it's kind of a do-it-yourself. So the beautiful thing about it is you can do it yourself, and you can get it all created, and it creates charts, and it creates, summarizes data and everything for you in a meaningful way. So there's some really good things about these. And the problem is this is 100 pages long, in my view. I think that's a little bit too long for me. I don't want to read a little novel when I want to do it. I want to figure out what to do. And so that's what it is. So too many pages, but it's also, not only is it do-it-yourself questions, it's do-it-yourself analysis. Like you get it, and then you've got to figure out how to do an analysis out of this. And in this particular case, it was comment overload. Oh my heavens. So anyway, and again, quite a bit of work for you. If you can do it, and if you have somebody who can devote their time to it, this is not a bad way to go, let me just say. But it is something you have to make sure you have the resources to handle. And then here's another one. This is an actual one from a city, and I like their results, actually. This is from a well-known insights provider who focuses on municipalities, and it's a good piece of work. They have good visualizations. They really did have a lot of information. They had some excellent questions. They had historical trends. It was very nicely done. And they did have a few importance ratings, not very many importance ratings. So you knew how people rated you. You just didn't know if one thing was more important than the next. Just really didn't know. The bad thing was this is 181 pages long, and it really was. And they did have an appendix with another 300 pages if you wanted to go into the appendix. And so, I wouldn't go this route. But I bet you could ask them to make this so it's not so long. And how can we do this in a way that doesn't kill us? Because, honestly, it shouldn't be this long. Difficult to prioritize. And in the end, it's a lot of work, because what do you do with 181 pages? So, and then the final one, by the way, this was a really good study, though. It was just long. And then the last one I want to talk about, this is the do-it-yourself. A lot of companies allow you to do it yourself and get the Excel spreadsheet output. And I had a city approach me and said, can you do this analysis for us? We got the Excel, and we're having a hard time. She said 2 years ago when we did this, I spent 80 hours doing the analysis. Times her rate, it was a lot of money that they put into this. And if you look at this, very satisfied, like how satisfied are you with the quality of life in the city? That's a great question. And then the very satisfieds are in one column. The satisfieds are in another column. The neither satisfied nor dissatisfied are in another column. Everything's in a separate column. And so to analyze them, you had to tally up each column, put them together, and somehow make something out of it. And it's possible. It took me 4 hours to just clean up the data set. And then I was able to quickly produce a really good report. But if you don't have that capability, you're going to spend 60 hours. So if you do a do-it-yourselfer, sometimes they have the ability to just get the Excel output and do the analysis. I would never do that if I were you. Then they have pay more and we'll build charts, we'll build information. At least do that, because otherwise you're just gonna put too much time into it. And it's not like the extra money is not going to be a fraction of what you do in time. So I suggest that. By the way, I would even use their tool to run on my surveys. I just wouldn't get their Excel output. And it's not that Excel is horrible. It's just like it's not designed for surveys. So that's the problem. Okay, so then you said, I love it, Ron. So what do we do now? So a few suggestions on how to design a better survey that works well for your citizens and that you'll appreciate. So my first recommendation is keep it short. And less is indeed more. And let me tell you, if you can do a 10-minute survey, let me tell you the beauty of it. There's several benefits. First of all, citizens are happier when it's short. So that's obvious. Second of all, it makes you prioritize. It forces you to prioritize if you keep it under 10 minutes. And or else you just say, well, let's ask this question and let's ask this question and let's ask this question, which in the end turns it into a death survey, So the constraints are your friend, and they'll make you be thoughtful about everything that's in there. And just set that rule. We're not going to go over like 9 or 10 minutes, maybe 11. So very important. Address your needs head on. Avoid curiosity questions. Do you know if somebody says, you know what I'd like to know? I'd like to know what they think of all of the city services or something. Like, you go, well, like, let's get a little more specific about what the problem is we're trying to solve here. Like, think about the problems you're trying to solve. Here's an example of a city who they were a small town. Now they're no longer, because of growth, a small town, but they wanted to preserve the small town feel. And so working with them, we came up with 5 options of things that they could do to preserve the small town feel of the city. And the people responded and they said, we need more wider sidewalks throughout the city. And it was actionable. Like, they knew what to do. Another one had a variety of new city investments that they were thinking about doing. Here are 10 things that we're thinking about doing in the city. Which ones are worth tax dollars to do? That one worked really well. How about, here are 10 intersections where we have bad traffic. Which ones do you recommend we focus on first to improve the traffic flow in the city? That one worked really well. Another one about communications. Here are all of the things we're thinking about communicating with you. Which ones would you like to have? That worked really well. But if you have things that are like, you think about the solutions, you think about what they are, and then you propose those, that addresses your needs head on. And we can also help you prioritize your budget, so some of those things can be in there if you do it wisely. Design for mobile. Almost any survey will work on a mobile phone today. Not all of them work well. So, some are very cumbersome on a mobile phone, and some can be very simple and intuitive. But more than 50% will do it on their mobile phone. In Marco Island, a retirement community, largely 65% did it on their mobile phone. A lot. So mobile friendly. Rank questions. We ask this. Do you hate rank questions? Forget the rank question altogether. Just say, what are your top 2? Look at this list, pick your top 2. That works super easy. They go, I like this one, and they're on their way. Because I care about this person's top 2, this person's top 2, this person's top 2. I don't care about anybody's number 5. Everybody's 1 or 2. Whatever's most important adds up to where you should focus your time and attention. So avoid rank questions. Do limit the open-ended questions. I like 1 or 2. Sometimes you can do 3. But what I find is if you do a 3rd one or a 4th one, they keep saying, well, see my answer before. Or, you know what I mean? Like they just feel like, because they normally let you know what they feel right up front with the first 1 or 2. And so the 3rd one, you've wasted your time and theirs. And then minimize the scale questions. And so we have come up with a way to have scale questions, even 60 of them, but you only ask the ones that are important to people, and it works super well. But you can have them. In my surveys, we only ask 10 scale questions. We're done, but we get what you need. And so anyway, there's my summary there. And by the way, let me pause right here before we run on. Are there any questions about survey design that you would like me to kind of address?
How do you safeguard, and I'm aware that there's some ways, but what would be your best practice to safeguard people manipulating survey responses to elicit a certain outcome? So in other words, every city has their share of malcontents, right? And so if you put a survey out there and you have several different ways for people, because you're trying to immerse it into the conversation that you get as many responses as possible, but how do you prevent someone from filling out a survey 15 times to kind of...
There are, fortunately, because we go online, right, an online survey, there are things you can do. And first of all, for a typical survey, what we do is we say, what city do you live in? And that's easy. And if they choose they're not living in the city, you remove them. But they might be lying about that. And then we say, what is your zip code? And that's important. And they might be lying about that, maybe. They might be lying about that. And then we show them a map of the city and we say, where do you live on the map? And we even show even beyond the city, I live in an area outside of the city, and that helps. So those three things are very, very helpful in doing that. And then we look at the IP address that they give. And if there's more than two from the same IP address, we look at them very carefully. Some of them are legitimate because you have like a library or a nursing home or a care center or something like that, right? And they have the same IP address. And we look at the responses. And if they're all different, you let them fly. But if they're kind of the same thing over and over and over again, I get rid of all of those. And with Marco Island, we got rid of about 80 that seemed to be duplicates, and we got rid of others for other reasons. But, and it was 80's a lot to get rid of, but they had so many. And so, but anyway, those are some things that we can do. And occasionally somebody might slip through, but it's rare with those things.
Are these electronic or paper?
We do electronic, and in some cities, if they want to do paper, we have a paper version that we fill out, but then the city kind of enters them in in behalf of that person.
Is the paper mailed to their homes?
One more time?
Is the paper survey mailed to their homes?
No, we actually make it available in the city offices if they want to come in. And so we let them know, and the way we have done it, we said, come on in and we'll give you a paper version if you want to take it paper. Because we really don't want to do the paper. It adds a lot of work. And the city that I just did it with got only 60 of those out of probably 1,200, and then the person who's data entering them in has taken probably 35 hours putting them in, a lot of time.
How do you ensure that your penetration is appropriate? In other words, what are the logistics of how do you get the message out to people for them to be able to respond to the survey? You email it to everybody. It's not like a typical random phone survey. You're sending it to them and hoping that enough people.
We're trying to invite everybody in. It all depends. Like if you have a super large city, like if you're over like 60,000 or so, we do have to put a limit. But if you're a city under 60,000, we try to get every citizen to take it. So we don't, and the how is we use multiple methods.
What we did on Marco Island was we sent out a press release announcing the survey, inviting people to take it, included the link. We put the link on social media. We have an email blast that we sent out. We have we're a city of 18,000 full-time residents. We have about 9,000 on our email list. So we emailed it out, and we got it out. I mean, we just pushed it out every way that we could think of. And we actually ended up getting, Ron had told me out of 18,000, he said, if you get 700 responses, statistically, that would be, 3 or 4% statistically would be sufficient response. We got over 3,000. So we got almost 20% responses back. So we were thrilled with that.
By the way, the poster child, I've only had one get more than that ever, so they did really well. But to answer your question, we try to use every available means of communication that a city has. Except for, and we have done like postcards mailed out, but that it's expensive and it doesn't really yield much. And I can show them when we've done that, what we get. But we do try to use everything electronically first, as much as we can. And then if they do want to go the postcard route or something, we support that.
I would think in that process, your marketing message to entice them to actually take the time to do this survey has to be brilliantly crafted. I mean, there's got to be some communication. This is the benefit as a resident you're going to exact.
We do our best with that. I think it's always an area to improve, and I think you're right on that. But we do a really good job, and we'd love to have posters that get put out with the QR codes and take the survey and help the city leaders and so forth.
Messaging within that.
The messaging is important. I mean, I mean, probably not. Don't go through it here, but it's actually very important to be open, authentic, and to talk about the value that the city places on this. And yeah, it's really important. But it has to be brief too. Anything long, sorry, they zone out too soon. So whatever you can do in about a half a paragraph normally is about what you need.
How do you address the data gap or information gap, perhaps between older
You know, it's an interesting, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I just briefly wanted to add, because this goes back to whether or not you should do paper copies. So we did not offer paper copies with our citizen engagement survey. We said it's online only, but we did say, if you need help, come to City Hall and we will help you get logged onto a computer and we'll help walk you through the survey. And we left the survey open, I think, for 10 days or 2 weeks. And in that period of time, I only got one phone call asking for help. And then that individual called back and said, never mind, my son helped me. I took the survey. So I do think, I wouldn't say it's a myth, but I think it might be overstated a little bit how much, an older demographic relies on paper or needs to have paper copies or can't access technology. At least that was our experience.
That's been my experience too. I see less of a limit between old and young, very little. That normally is not a problem. I see more of a limit, and it's interesting that you'd ask, but I see more of a limit between minority groups. So I get very few Black males. It's just they don't want to take it, and we're working hard to overcome that bias. Hispanics take it. Black males take it the least. Hispanics take it kind of a little bit less as well. You know what I mean? And part of that's language, but then we do it in languages. And so like some of that's harder. And so we're working with churches, we're working with others to do outreach, to bring in more people and to think about our ways through. So the more we encounter, the more we come up with solutions, but some of those are tough. Some of those are tough.
Statistically speaking, what is the bare minimum percentage, if you will, of responses that you consider like statistically relevant?
Yeah. So the way it works is actually in statistics, when you've done over like 300 or so, you have plus or minus about 5 to 5.5% or something. And then if you have like 700, you have plus or minus, it's about 4.25%. And then if you get to 3,000, like she had, you have plus or minus 2%. Like it's really, and so then the statistical relevance is really strong. But anything over, that's why I said 700 to her. 700 gives you a good number. But the reason why I like more is because we ask for comments and you want to be able to do a deep dive on certain themes. And if you don't have very many respondents, you can't do very many deep dives, right? You just can't explore in depth because not very many people are in your base to do it. And so I love having 1,500, 2,000 or whatever, and I don't charge any more for any, for doing that kind of a thing. But so 700 I like as a minimum because then you can still analyze the open-ended comments inside of specific themes pretty well. And the rest is icing. And we're going to do a Q&A at the end, so I think we'll roll on here a little bit more. And then you want to tell us your experience, Casey?
Sure. So we're actually going to pull up the dashboard from Marco Island, and I'll just briefly show you some of the responses that we received and then what we did with that information. So right off the bat, you can see we didn't have to spend a lot of time analyzing the information. It's very clear to see through the dashboard that we were provided. And this is one of the first pages. And a very common question, do you think the city's going in the right direction or the wrong direction? And you can see here, we were pretty well split. So on the face of it, you might look and say, well, that's not very helpful. It's pretty much 50-50, right? But here's where it becomes helpful. So on the right-hand side where you see the demographic filters, you could go down to how long have you lived in the city? And when we click on those filters, if we look at people who have lived in the city for 15 years or more, then you see, okay, they're the ones who think we're moving in the wrong direction. They're the people who have been here long. They've seen increased congestion, increased traffic. They've seen the impact of growth. And they're the ones who are, think we're headed in the wrong direction. If you look at the people who have lived in the city for, 5 years or less, they think we're moving in the right direction. So they're new and still happy, basically. So these filters on the side are very helpful in terms of drilling into some of this information. And then if we go to the growth and development, this was another one of the dashboard slides. that ask residents, and again, we ask residents, pick the 2 things that are most important to you. And so you can see here how all of that fell out among the over 3,000 people who took it. So the 2 most important were managing growth and density and traffic congestion. And then it asks them, well, how are we doing in those areas that you think are most important? And you can see there, they don't think we're doing very well. And this is the sort of bad news that I think sometimes city councils or even city management don't necessarily want that bad news. But it's not really bad news. It's just information. And we just have to take that information and act on it. So for example, with this information, one of the things that we did was we invested in a intelligent traffic signal study so that we could improve traffic flow at our major intersections. We've also invested and put in our budget every year additional money for road restoration and road paving. So parking was an issue here as well, and we've invested in doing a master parking study. So these are the things, this data actually helped us inform and helped the city council inform the decisions that they made in terms of investing resources. So then we'll look at events, facilities and events. Again, we ask citizens, pick your top 2. And here you can see the things that they love. They love our parks. They love city events. They love having concerts and fireworks shows. And asked how we're doing with those. They said we're doing well. So this was a good news slide, right? This was like, okay, these are areas where we're performing well. We don't want to cut these things in the budget. We don't want to cut resources. We want to keep working in these areas and doing well in the areas where citizens enjoy and say that these are the most important. And then the final slide I'll show you is the top 20. Because we did get so many results from our residents, that's a lot of information coming in. And from this slide, we had asked in all these different categories, we had asked residents, pick your top 2. Pick your top 2 on growth, pick your top 2 in facilities. And then we took all of their top 2s. So as they got to the
10 top 2s.
There were 10 top 2s. So as they got to the end of the survey, it showed their list of here's everything you said was important to you. Now pick your top 2. Now pick the final top 2 that are really important. And this is the slide we got. So this was all consolidated and compiled into a top 20 list. And you can see here, the top 1 was still managing growth and density in the city. Parking actually fell down on the list and was no longer in the top 10. Fire EMS was important, and that's an area where we're performing well. But again, just having this information and consolidating all of the information into a top 20 slide let us see right away, okay, we know what we need to work on. We know where we need to invest resources. So now let's fast forward a year to September 2022. We did this in the summer of 2021. And in September of 2022, we were hit by Hurricane Ian. And, Marco Island is just south of Naples. Naples, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, those areas were hit a lot harder than the city of Marco Island, but our entire island flooded. We are a small city. We have a small staff. Our crews were stretched thin, and we were working hard in the aftermath of this storm. And this is where, again, not only gathering data, but doing the after action review was of utmost importance. So after this storm, about a week later, Ron reached out to me just to check in and say, how are you doing? How's the island? How are your residents? And do you need any help? And I'm a big believer that when somebody offers help, you should accept it. And when he said, do you need any help? I said, yes, we need to do an after action report and we need to get input from our employees. We had actually been receiving pretty consistent and vocal input from our residents. So we knew what the impact was for our residents, and we knew what was important to them. But our employees, we're asking them to come to work every single day, or in some cases stay at work for multiple days, for a long time and respond to this storm. And we really needed to hear from them. It was going back to my military days of, you want to hear from everybody, from the lowest employee to the highest employee. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How can we improve? So I asked Ron, we need an after action survey specific to this event, and we need to hear from all of our employees. And within a week, he put it together. I sent it out to our employees. Within a week, we got the results back, and he, again, consolidated everything into a dashboard, sent me the dashboard link. And so probably in less than a month's time from the hurricane, while everything was still fresh in our minds, we were able to collect this information and have this data that we could present to our city leadership, to the city council, and to our employees. And one of the first slides that I'll share with you ask our employees, what was the personal impact of the storm? So, are you under major strain or minor strain personally? Was your home damaged? Was your vehicle damaged? We had, luckily, we only had 4 employees who lost their homes because they were flooded. But we had many employees who lost vehicles because they were flooded. We had about 8 feet of storm surge from that hurricane. So this was really important for us to see right off the bat, because we realized we're asking our employees to keep showing up, keep doing the work. And we need to help them, right? We need to help them get to work. We need to help them with temporary housing until their insurance kicks in. And so this was very informative for us. The next slide shows, and this is where this was kind of eye-opening and important for us on the leadership team. This slide shows that before the hurricane, we did not communicate well with our employees. We asked our employees, what do you need? And they said, we need better communication before the incident. And you can see we performed poorly in this area. We were busy communicating with residents. We issued a mandatory evacuation. We were trying to evacuate residents. We were trying to prepare them, and we just didn't focus on our employees. And one of the things that we did since this is we entered in every single one of our employees' cell phone numbers into code red. We figured we communicate with our citizens via code red. We're going to start communicating with our employees via code red. And that was a result of this survey. The next slide shows what our employees needed during the event, what was important to them. And again, this is, not great news. It was a little bit embarrassing, to be honest with you. But what they told us is they need to have a clear schedule. They want to know what their work schedule is going to be. They want to know where they're going to sleep. They want to know where they're going to eat, where they're going to shower. Again, we're asking them, when you come to work, you may be expected to stay for 3 or 4 days, but we didn't give them any of that basic information. And, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top of the triangle is your self-actualization, where you can perform at your highest. But at the bottom are your basic needs. Everyone needs food, shelter, water. And we weren't even providing their basic needs, right? Well, we kind of did, but we had them figure it out on their own. And this revealed that. Like, how could we ask them to perform at a higher level if we didn't provide their basic needs? And I'll tell you a little bit about what we did in this regard as well. But finally, the next slide shows, what about the work? We ask them, well, how's your work going, right? You're still coming to work every day. How's your actual work going? And on this slide, it showed that the work is going well, right? Our employees are still showing up. They're still working together. They're still performing as a team. They're meeting the needs of the community. The debris is getting picked up. The stop signs are being repaired, and traffic signals are being repaired, and welfare checks are being done. So on the work itself, we were doing okay, right? We were doing pretty well on the work itself. It was just more of like meeting the personal needs of our employees. So I'll just point to 2 things that we did as a result of these last couple of slides. Regarding this one on actually getting the work done, we realized we need to recognize our employees. We need to stop and thank them. So we did an employee appreciation lunch. We were actually lucky. It was hosted by the Gary Sinise Foundation. And we had a nice employee appreciation lunch where we thanked all of our employees. The city manager borrowed an idea from the city of Venice and had a Hurricane Ian challenge coin made. And we gave a challenge coin to all of our employees. And we just took some time out just to recognize them. And that was really important. And And we realized that from this survey, that even with all the stress and all the strain, they still got the work done. And it was important to acknowledge that. And then the second thing we did, because of the communication and because of the things that they told us they needed, we set up a hurricane planning cell in December of last year. And from December to May, every month for 6 months, we met and we developed an improvement plan. We identified areas that we wanted to work on. We assigned responsibility, and we worked through that plan over a 6-month period so that we would be ready come June 1st. And one of the things that came out of that planning cell was a letter. So last week, every single one of our employees got a letter from the city manager that outlined hurricane preparedness. Here's what you need to do now to prepare your family. If you're assigned to work, your manager will give you your schedule. Here's where you will sleep. Here's where you will eat. Here's where you will take a shower. Here's how we will communicate with you. Here's how to communicate if all communications go down. Here's where to meet if the roads are flooded and you can't get to work. So we just outlined everything in a 2.5-page letter and gave that to our employees just last week. And that was very well received. But that's something that we would not have known to do if we didn't ask them for their feedback and then use that information to put together that letter so that we could better communicate with them.
Let's pause for some questions. Any questions for Casey here?
So the dashboard is backing up to the previous survey, the dashboard that created the ability to kind of root out the questions and look at the changes based on the demographics of who's answering. Is that available to the public, or is that just internal?
No, actually, we posted that link on our website, and the public could see all of the results, and they could drill into the filters and see everything. They could even see all the open-ended comments.
You
too.
can go there today. It's there.
Yeah, it's on
Just
our
do a search
website.
on survey.
Yeah.
It's a little buried now, but at one time it was prominent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I heard you describe your experience with council, and I'm wondering if they have been able to utilize this information with their constituents and show where improvements have been made, or like you said, we decided to make studies at these intersections. Have they latched onto this information to use to have more credibility with their constituents, or just have conversations?
I'm not sure if they do that on an individual basis. We did that survey in the summer of 2021, and I know initially it was used in that way. It was used as a tool, especially because we were preparing for budget season. And so it was referenced that the survey said this or the survey said that. But now that we're a little bit further away from it, I think they're probably referencing it a little bit less just because of the timeline.
Some cities do it every other year, and some cities do it every year that I work with. And so you can keep it very much alive.
Some of the cities, there's some breadth in the cities. I wonder if you've ever looked at like census tracts or anything like that in your demographic selection criteria. As an example, in my city, it's a very diverse city, but there are areas that are uniquely by themselves because of their geography. You have like a major river or something like that passing through. Do you do that kind of breakdown?
Do you know, we do actually. We normally show a map of the city, and then we could work with you to draw out the map of the city to have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different areas, whatever's appropriate for your city, that would be geographically important to you. And then we say, where do you live in the city? And they'll pick it from the map. And that's been super helpful. They go, oh yeah, that's area 6. And that area, they do need more love and attention. You know, oh, that's area 2. That's an area where it's newer and they just don't have the same problems that some other areas have. And so they're able to sort in their minds and see the differences by geography. And we didn't do it in Marco Island because it's like they didn't have that need. But most cities do like that and use that very thing.
So, and if you said this, and I missed it, I apologize, but we're capturing sentiment from our constituents, survey model. And then I guess maybe in Marco Island, did you then take that awareness and knowledge to respond.
Very true.
So how much are we actually communicating back to them? Is their response and the lack of, support or favoritism towards something tied to a real situation, or is it my understanding of it? And the second part of that, Marco Island, because this is something we're doing collectively today, are you building performance metrics within your operations that are tied specifically to moving those needles?
You take that first if you want.
Well, I would say we are not specifically building performance metrics, but the fact that we got these items into our budget, so we know that they're moving forward based on being budgeted and being prioritized by the city council. So, and some of them are multi-year plans, so, they're continuing.
And then regarding the results of the survey are very fascinating. And sometimes when you get it, and a city leader will look at the results, they'll say, they don't get it. They don't understand the situation. And I said, precisely. So sometimes it indicates a communication gap and an understanding gap, and sometimes it represents a real shortfall by the city. And it's just like in your hands to work those two things. And I was working with the city in Georgia, and they, for the last year, they've been communicating about some of the things that they think are misunderstood, because they are. And then we're going to do the next survey here in a couple of months. So it can work both ways, either to inform your communication plan or to inform you where you need to put more resources. Yeah.
How does the statistical accuracy of this type of survey compare to like a telephone survey where they're making random phone calls to the whole?
I think it's equal. And the reason why I say that is even on a phone survey, they can say, I don't want to do it. You don't get, as a matter of fact, most people turn down a phone survey than take it. And most people turn down a survey. Like we mail to 100%, or we contact most people in the city, and 20% take it, which is true. But what we do is we look on the map. Somebody asked about a map. We look to make sure the map is representative and that the demographics are representative. And then we go for it. Beyond that, it's just like you have so many people responding that you have just really good coverage of your city.
So the numbers guard against the vocal minority being overrepresented in the results?
There's not much of that. No, in a vocal minority, you get just as many. Yeah. So I don't think you get that problem as I've looked very carefully at this, and I read every comment, by the way. Like I know what everybody people are saying, and it's not just the vocal minority. Not at all.
I'm sorry. And pricing is it? The pricing is kind of based on the number of questions. Is it the kind of survey?
Well, I don't know that this is the room to really talk about that, but I'd be glad to talk about you.
Sorry,
We're competitive, but I don't think it's fair to do that here. But let me just say that it's flat pricing, and there's no increase. Like it's what it is.
Marco Island is rather seasonal, correct?
Yes.
Can
And
be.
you guys did the survey in the summertime. So my question is, was there any concern about having of course you did it in the summer, so there's less seasonal people there.
Did we do it in the summer?
But, was there any concern that the residents were?
We did it from March to April.
Okay, March, April, so you hit the end of the season.
Yeah.
But any concern about seasonal residents taking the survey when they are not actually homeowners?
Well, yes.
Yes.
And a lot of people who took the survey don't even live in Marco Island. They own property on Marco Island. So they had this, and they wanted to get the information from people who may live in New Jersey but own property on Marco Island because they're vested in the city, right? And so we asked them if they own property on the island, and we also asked them if they lived on the island.
We also asked if they own a business, because we figured they may not live on Marco Island, but if they own a business on Marco Island or work on Marco Island, their feedback is probably just as valid as a full-time resident. So we had a number of, at the very beginning, when we asked for their zip code, we asked, what's your association to Marco Island? And then we had a list that they could check from: own, rent, seasonal,
We had that in there.
business. And then that became one of the filters. So we could see, are these full-time residents? Are they seasonal residents? Are they non-residents? And we could filter out anyone we wanted.
It's unique to
filter out.
them, but every city has their unique needs, and we
Right.
make sure that it's like correct for you.
I just had a quick question. For cities that you've incorporated into this every year or so, are you finding more and more participation? Or
Every year. So the first year we get a good threshold, and the second year we seem to get 20% more, give or take. And then I don't have anywhere. I'm on the third year, so I don't know. But anyway, we got a good increase. And we didn't have initially benchmarks when we did Marco Island. Sorry, they were the first, right? They were actually the first one that I did well, I did the first one for the Texas town, and then we did a couple others, but they were kind of different. And so now we have benchmarks, but not like some have like tons in their benchmarks, but we only have like.
So people start feeling like their voices are being heard and they participate.
They really did think their voices were being heard. I think the ones who took it the first time took it again the second because it wasn't so bad, right? And then more took it because the invitation came. But I haven't asked them why more took it. I just noticed I've got 20% more with each new city that I've done the second time. 20 or around there percent. Yeah.
In your banking surveys, my guess is they were a lot more basic. Like, would you recommend this bank to a friend? Did you enjoy your experience, your service experience? And they're typically like very simple like this. This is not.
No. I think, look, yeah, they were equally complex, but because we were trying to solve problems that the company had, we needed to sort out things. So if you ask about satisfaction or features or something like that, they can be pretty simple. But in a bank, it's every bit as complex as a city in its own way, and you have a lot of moving parts. And I thought it would be simplistic too, but it wasn't at all. And every industry has their own complexities, and it was true there too.
Did you break out the data by age?
We did on this one, and we always do. So we right now we normally do it by age and by gender, and if they have kids or not kids. Those seem to be things that really do matter. We put in income, but normally we don't do that anymore. It just seems like it causes people to feel uncomfortable one way or the other. So it's really rare to put in income. We have for a couple of questions unique surveys where income seemed to be helpful, but it's really rare. Race we do ask in some places and in others not. And normally we've done it just to make sure we could get as much of a balanced profile as possible and to try to encourage more response. And even in a couple of cities we said, hey, we're running really low on African-American males. If you're an African-American male, please take the survey. And we'd get a little bit of a bump, and people willing to take it because sometimes you need to do that. But so yeah, we asked the demographics, but not too many. All right, so what we'd like to do is I'll summarize some of my thoughts, and then Casey will summarize some of her thoughts, and then we'll take any other additional questions you may have. So the first thing I want to say is raise your expectations of what you can get out of a citizen survey or an employee survey. I mean, you can get really good data, really inspiring and helpful data. Raise your expectations. I spoke with someone not long ago, a city manager. Did you do a survey? Yes, we just finished. Is it working for you? Yes. I hear hesitation there. Well, you need a Ph.D. in statistics to use it. And that's what the person said. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, raise your expectations, demand more. Demand more clarity from whoever you work with. If it's me, you should expect clarity, and you should be able to request it. Raise your expectations and don't be satisfied because a survey is not just a survey. You can get really good data. Reject long, complex. It means they haven't figured out how to analyze the data well or something. Like, you shouldn't have everything by everything. Like, and then we hope you can figure this out. Reject that. It should be simpler. Casey, they just had like 18 slides. Is really all it was, but they had the flexibility to dig and explore and get all kinds of information, but on their terms. And it shouldn't be, you shouldn't have a long, complex report. Demand intuitive analysis. Like it should be like you see it and you go, oh, I see where this is going. Like if you see it and you can't understand where it is, ask them to help you with that, and to make sure that it's clear and clean and intuitive. And then as far as your survey goes, I mentioned these things, but keep it as short as possible. Einstein said famously, it should be as simple as possible, but no simpler, right? And surveys should be as short as possible, no shorter. Like, make it deliver in a brief amount of time. Make sure that it's easy to take. Like if you don't want to take it, they won't want to take it. Like, how many of you just avoid surveys? A lot of you do, I know, right? You avoid surveys. And so make it so that at least you would want to take it as best you can. And then, how we saw important performance, like ask for that. Like you don't want to be focused on something of low importance with a high problem when you could be focusing on something of high importance with a high problem, right? You should know those things. And even high importance with a moderate problem is probably more to be focused on than something of low importance and a big problem. And then action-oriented questions, as I mentioned, make sure you can act on these things. If it's not something where you can act on it and use it in some meaningful way, if somebody says, what I'd like to know, and they just kind of, you don't know exactly how it's going to be used, push back, make sure it's action-oriented.
Okay, I'll just wrap up with a couple of points to emphasize. I would say don't fear doing a citizen engagement survey or an employee survey. Welcome it. Welcome the feedback, even if it's negative, even if it's critical. It will be helpful and it will improve your organization. It can also be a great tool. Again, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can use the information that you receive to help with budget planning, strategic planning, improve communication. It should be a tool to improve your organization, improve your leadership. And we didn't talk a lot about how the survey itself was built, but I will just tell you that it was a very collaborative process. The city manager and I focused on the topic areas. We did not focus on questions because I don't know how to write a survey question. And if you try to write a survey question, you're probably going to, even if it's unintentional, you'll probably skew it toward a certain answer. So that's why I say, think about the topic areas that you want to know about, and then leave it to the experts to design the questions and to do the analysis. And that way you can stay out of it and you can just be objective and get the analysis. And then finally, I would just, again, I said this at the beginning, but I think if you just take a step back and ask yourself, is it even worth doing to begin with? I would really encourage you to just do it. And really consider the value of an employee survey or a citizen engagement survey, because it does create that environment where you're telling people their opinions matter, their voice matters. They don't have to show up in your office or they don't have to show up at a council meeting to complain in order to be heard, that you want to hear from them. And this is a really constructive and organized way to hear from your citizens. So thank you for listening.
Thank you all.